Welcome to the Near Memo, a weekly conversation about search, social, and commerce. What happened, why it matters, and the implications for local. Okay, so let's move on to your question about, well, not your question, your discussion about the DMA and regulation in general.
Yeah, I think, trying to take a longer view here of like what, not getting wrapped up in the moment of every news release and every, corporate PR event,
product
launch, product rollout. But just how are we going to remember this year? And I think, I think that this will be the year. Mike and I were fortunate enough to go to Brussels in March and meet with the European Commission and hear kind of how they're organizing their investigation of the Digital Markets Act. Obviously, I think it was March 4th or something was the deadline of 2024 that all of the six gatekeepers needed to be in compliance with the act. As soon as Mike and I landed back in the States, the Commission announced a formal investigation into Google in flights and hotels and shopping. For whatever reason, local is sort of a different beast in the EU than it is here and is sort of treated separately. But I think these are very real investigations. The Commission hosted a series of follow-up workshops in September. We saw Google do some sort of their classic performative PR event and product rollout where they sort of went back to a 10 blue links mode in 3 countries for hotel search. Obviously, everybody complained, both hotel suppliers as well as consumers.
Which is their intention.
Totally, it's malicious compliance, right? Whoever came up with that term, it's totally malicious compliance.
Well, they did the same thing with limiting Maps access in the
right. They're trying to generate user complaints so that they can point to them and say, look, these users are having a bad experience. We're here to serve the user. And don't you want to serve the user as well? Not these evil aggregators, middlemen,
That's right. So, but I guess, again, thinking about like, what are we going to remember about 2024? I think that these investigations are going to have real teeth in the spring once the sort of dust settles on the reorg of all the new commissioners that came about as a result of the EU elections. And I think I think these investigations are going to keep going. There's going to be drawn out legal battles. Obviously, the Google shopping case was also decided at the European version of the Supreme Court this year, finally, after a decade or something of that. But that's going to give all of these regulators a very strong leg to stand on as they force Google to end its monopolistic behavior, or at least curb it dramatically in an era when they're under increasing competition. I guess my comment would be, we've seen the dramatic response to Google of having a real competitor in ChatGPT, over the last 12 to 18 months. Wouldn't it have been nice if this kind of regulation actually came about in 2012 and 2014 and 2015 when Google was clearly already a monopoly and has basically been stagnant as a company in terms of its innovation of the SERP for the last decade. And I think that this is the reason I'm bringing up the DMA and sort of the context of what we're going to remember. I actually think this is a huge tipping point year for the interface of search moving forward and the fragmentation of search moving forward. And I think that is probably going to be the big story that we remember this year. And I think it's, the DMA is going to play a very important role in that. It's a billion user market for Google. They can't just walk away from it. There's a potential, apparently, incoming President Trump has nominated a similarly anti-big tech person to lead the FTC after Lina Khan is sort of forced out. So I think that there's a decent chance that this kind of activity continues here on this side of the Atlantic as well. And I think that that's really going to put even more pressure on Google to change its search interface. And I think I personally am excited about it just as somebody who's in the space as a consumer. Yeah. I think it's going to lead to a lot of questions from clients, which means, a lot of business for us, hopefully moving forward. It's a very exciting time to be in search. And I think I'm more optimistic for the challenges over the next 5 years than I've been in a long time. Really since the advent of the 10-pack, I would say. So I'm pretty excited to see kind of the outcome of both the regulatory side of things as well as the competitive side of things, and what changes it's going to force in the Google SERP interface.
So one footnote that we need to drop, because we didn't mention it earlier, is the Google antitrust decision where they were found to be an illegal monopoly, and now the court is considering various remedies, which
including divestiture of Chrome,
right,
which would also be a big story. Yeah,
right, exactly. So we need to sort of honorable mention to that,
yep.
and then one other thing that's sort of tied into AI that is impactful potentially about the user experience in search is the idea of agents, sort of autonomous agents that will do things on your behalf. And Google has that, and ChatGPT has that, and Anthropic Claude has that. So, rather than searching discrete, this sort of goes back to the kind of the faceted search idea in a way. Instead of searching for discrete information and piecing that all together yourself, there's a sort of sequence of actions that are taken sort of behind the scenes by an agent acting on your behalf, and then an outcome, right, which could include a purchase or not, as the case may be. I think we're going to see some of that integrated into search, if not in 2025, then over time. And that may have some really interesting impacts on both user behavior and sort of SEO and SEO adjacent activity.
So one of the things I'm seeing in Apple right now is the making available of system level APIs, for example, to natural language processing APIs to allow any app to answer a Siri question, app events, which allows any app to surface types of data. And I'm wondering if that is that type of response, giving system level access. I just saw the other day that the first Apple Pay alternative was released in Norway. So they're giving system level access to their tools. And I'm wondering if this is the way that mobile platforms deal with the coming regulatory control, trying to prevent features from being more and more brought into the mothership, right? Mm-hmm. In other words, one of the problems that Apple has is they could dominate all behaviors on their phone, or Google has, Android and search, they can dominate behaviors and act as a monopolist. How do the monopolists continue to innovate and respond to this access question? I guess.
Well, I can't imagine that access for the Norwegian version of Apple Pay, I can't imagine that was a voluntary decision to get that.
No, it wasn't.
Access that had to be forced by the DMA.
It was forced by the DMA, but it also sets a model for how to do this, right?
Right.
Well, and that raises a larger question, which we don't have time to discuss today, which is how do these companies actually comply? I think there are certain cases where that's easier and certain cases where that's much harder. I think in the case of, go ahead, David.
Well, I was going to say, in the case of Google Shopping, again, the decision from the European Supreme Court, High Court of Justice, I think is the actual name of it. The opinion was essentially that any boxes on the SERP were self-preferencing. And so that, I think, would have just a huge implication for any kind of knowledge graph related result that Google is trying to surface. That is Google's own property, Google's own first party information, and that it can't receive preferential treatment over third party information. I think if that's the standard that the European Commission continues to abide by, that's going to be very, very difficult for Google to react to and maintain this sort of ironclad grip on users staying on Google.
Although we did see them maintain that ironclad grip around local when we went to that meeting. This, local is not being discussed. It's included as part of search.
But that's a box.
It is a box.
That's right.
Yeah.
All right. So any final words on any of these topics or anything else we didn't get a chance to discuss?
I'm looking forward to next year.
Yeah, me too. Exactly. I think that was I'm bullish on the prospects for search knowledge generally, and search research, and it's just a really exciting time to be in our industry in a way that I don't think it's been in quite some time. So I'm very optimistic about it. Appreciate being on with you guys. Appreciate all of our listeners. Obviously, we at Near Media made a big change at the start of December and put most of our newsletter content and analysis content behind a paywall. Would encourage all of you guys to sign up for that. Obviously, this podcast is going to remain free, but that's definitely, if you want to hear more from us and hear more of our insights about where things are headed, we hope you'll consider subscribing to our all access plan.
And
All
if
right.
you have multiple team members, we have a 5-pack special. Remind me the details.
Just email dm@nearmedia.co and we'll get you set up.
All right.
Okay. All right. On that note, thanks everybody. Have a great holiday. And this may not be the last podcast of the year, depending on when it's published, but I'll say we'll see you next year.
Thanks for joining David, Mike, and Greg. To stay on top of the latest developments in local, subscribe to our newsletter at nearmedia.co. We'll see you next week.